that we do.
When I was doing research on Fun Home, especially when the Tony Awards nominations came out, etc., there seemed to be, in my head, it seemed to me that Fun Home was sort of the underdog musical going into on Broadway because of, from what I can gather, is because the show itself, Fun Home, was at a theatre that held a capacity of 750 seats, and then you had other Broadway stages that held thousands of people, and then all of a sudden you're going into the Tony Awards, and you got the American in Paris, which is the classic musical that's been brought back to life, and then you got The Visit and etc. Did you ever think it was in some ways an underdog musical for you, or did you just think, no, this is or did you just think that this musical was different because it, unlike other musicals where it's all a spectacle, because it's a spectacle, most musicals are spectacles because they're razzle dazzle or they're loud and more atmospheric. Did you feel like, because Fun Home was more of a realistic musical that it touches on serious subjects? I hope you understand where I'm trying to come from. Because did you ever feel that way? Did you feel that, yeah, this is a musical where we're just trying to bring the audience back into real life here?
I think it's, you know, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, is your question about whether we thought it would be like how we thought it would sort of, where we thought it would land in terms of the Tonys, or the just how it was considered in terms of what its terms of success were?
I think the latter. I think the latter.
I mean, I think every piece of theater that you make sets its own terms for success. You know, a show like Hello, Dolly, for instance, is, you know, I went to see the revival that happened a couple of years ago with Bette Midler, and that musical does not make a blind bit of sense. I mean, it's adapted from a Thornton Wilder story, The Matchmaker. So they're somewhere in there, there's these sort of vestigial bones of an actually quite substantial story, but on its own terms, it does not make a blind bit of sense, right? When she shows up at the Harmonia Gardens at the second act, and they're like, she's back, you know, they sing Hello, Dolly, she's back. Where has she been? We don't even know. We haven't even heard of the Harmonia Gardens. Like, it makes narratively no sense. And yet those songs are written, I mean, talk about deploying the levers of musical theater. The way those songs build, the way those verses build, the way it's orchestrated, I mean, I thought, like, literally by the end of Hello, Dolly, people were on their feet, like we lost our minds. We were just like literally on our feet, like ah! Like just screaming. We couldn't. That is like music theater as a conduit for a collective joy. There's also the weird thing about Hello, Dolly that has this sort of meta element. It is made for a certain kind of iconic actor, female actor of a certain type, and when she comes down those stairs, it is about the character, but it's also about that actor. Absolutely. Like, that is how it's made. It is made for Barbra Streisand, Carol Channing, Pearl Bailey, you know, so that when she comes down, we're feeling something about how we feel about certain kinds of performers. You know, there's crazy meta thing that happens. Okay, so Hello, Dolly is not deep in terms of its themes, and yet it is completely perfect musical on its own terms. whatever it is it sets out to do, it every possibility that musical has to be 1,000,000% itself as it's set out, it absolutely fulfills. So any piece of theater, particularly musical, that does that is a success. So I think, to me, the greatest accomplishment of Fun Home is it had much weightier. It was a much weightier story. It was very complicated. It was very hard to tell that story, even to figure out quite in dramatic terms what the story was. And ultimately, I think the great success of Fun Home was that we completed it. All of the things that all of the possibility that we set in motion, we took it all the way. So from an artistic standpoint, that was the success of Fun Home. And then, and what that meant was that, something that was challenging was actually completely apprehendable. What you want is for people to sit down and not be thinking, oh, that's an interesting choice. Huh, yes, I see why they did that. You just want them to be in it. And then on the other end, be filled with feeling, so that there's so many mechanics going on. There's so much work, there's so much sweat, and you don't feel any of it. You just get picked up and carried through something, and something about your interior world and also the lens with which you view things when you leave the theater is altered a little bit. That's what you want to have happen. And I felt like we succeeded, and then there was this other thing, which was the assumptions about what could be successful and what is what occupies the center of the culture and what doesn't. So, when we were at every step of the way, people were like, this is really great. I don't know if it can succeed at the next step. I don't know if it can, it did fine in the little theater, the public. I don't know how it'll do in the bigger theater. Did very well in the bigger theater. I don't know if Broadway audiences will like it. Broadway audiences are liking it. I don't know if it can win a Tony. And at some point, we started to ask people, will people be able to handle this? Will people be able to understand this? Are you having trouble understanding it? Or are you afraid other people are going to have a hard time with it? Well, it's other people. And, we were very lucky to have very courageous, committed producers who they weren't afraid and they kept putting it forward, And I think that was really great. And I think, the Tony voters have different imperatives, and those imperatives change at different times. Sometimes it's about lifting a show that will, a bunch of Tony voters are, they're in the touring houses. So they want that imprimatur so that they can sell the shows in their touring houses, but that's not everybody. And there are a lot of things at stake. And I think that one of the things that happened with Fun Home, I don't know if you saw or remember the movie Shakespeare in Love.
Yes.
In that, there's one of my favorite, I haven't seen it in a long time, but one of my favorite characters in Shakespeare in Love is the producers, and how, as I remember it, like the producers who are, they're worried about all kinds of really kind of petty, but also they're worried about the money, and their egos are involved and whatever. And then when the beautiful play happens, you see that the experience of transcendence in theater is ultimately what everybody is after. To get there, we get pulled in a million different directions, but ultimately the true transcendent experience, if it wasn't for that, we'd all be doing something else. It doesn't happen very often. We lose track of it, but when it happens, it's so profound that we keep on doing this thing through a million heartbreaks, bad productions, sellouts, betrayals, all of it for that moment. And I think, voting when Fun Home won the Tony, people voted for the thing they were voting for, the thing that they felt really mattered, beyond all those other things. And I think that because we had done the formal thing that I talked about, because we had actually exploited the theater of it, we had paid off the theater of it. I think that is what made people want to vote for it. It wasn't like, this show is pretty good and it's about gay people, so we should vote for it. It was like, I had a theatrical experience there that, meant something to me. And but I think that in voting for it, one of the things that we were sort of had an eye on as we were working on it and developing the ad campaign and so forth was, the reflexive thing, which is to sort of ghettoize ourselves, right? And I mean, one of the things I said in the ad meetings was, I don't want to hear the word universal, because what you're saying is, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. There are some, lesbians and gay people here, but they're not, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. It's not really about them. I was like, stop it, stop it, stop it. Own what it is, stop apologizing for it, stop covertly apologizing for it. And also, this is, obviously it's not Sondheim, but it is the predecessor in terms of, or one of the predecessors in terms of being a kind of, more dramatically meaty or weighty piece of musical theater, is that we won a ton of awards. We've, a bunch of things have already happened. Give us a muscular ad campaign. Don't undersell us. Present us as a serious, successful piece of musical theater that has already proven itself. Stop unconsciously apologizing and reassuring people that the women and the lesbians are not going to make them feel uncomfortable. Just stop it, because all you're doing is communicating anxiety. Now, I'm saying this as if we were fighting with this ad agency, and that's not what happened. I think that was, that's an impulse that is the way these things are often approached. And when we said, don't do that, they were like, great, you're right, we won't do it. But there was no, our ad agency was awesome. But I think that's, so that was the thing about the Tonys, I think there was this reflexive way that it kept being like, this is a sideshow to mainstream culture. And we kept asserting, no, this is it. This is excellent theater, or successful theater, however we want to say it. This is theater that's connecting with its audiences. And if we hadn't won the Tonys, that reflexive, sort of sideshow narrative would have been the narrative. So that was all that to say that the value of winning the Tony was that it was the final sort of frontier to say, this was a successful piece of theater in this year.